A guy called Brett Andy once wrote, "Do you think if minutes were edible, they'd taste good enough that we'd want to go back for seconds?" I'm BrettFish, and this is Out of the Fishbowl. Now, when it comes to time, there are a lot of interesting things we have to say about it. Do you have the time? I don't have the time. I wish I had time. I'll make time. Sorry, I didn't have the time. The time got away from me. I need more time. Can you find some time? Let's make up for lost time. We tend to blame or scapegoat time for a lot of things. Things which are usually our fault and come to intentionality or priority. Likely surfing on the back of procrastination, because let's face it, when it comes to procrastination, I am a pro. And yet time tends to mind its own business and just continue to tick along while we choose to do or not do the things that we are meant to or want to or dream of or hope for. So let's talk a little bit about time, and let's get creative about how we engage with the time that we have available to us. That is, if you have the time, for this conversation that I have decided to call
Episode 7. It's about time.
Now, when we're talking about time, there is one phrase that comes to mind, and it goes a little something like this. Time is on my side. Yes, it is. And you probably have to be a certain age to be able to pick that up. But if you are somebody that recognized that little phrase, that little song piece, then it probably freaked you out. It is from a movie called Fallen that starred Denzel Washington back when he was younger. And it is probably, or it contains probably one of the best twists of any movie that I've watched. And the premise of the movie, I'm not going to give away spoilers. The premise of the movie, it basically starts with a serial killer who is being executed. And the moment that he dies, he is touching, or just after he dies, he touches a police officer. Something happens, but he touches one of the cops. And somehow his spirit kind of transfers into this other person. And Denzel Washington is a policeman. And he's sitting at his desk, and this other kind of officer, sergeant, comes across to him and calls him to kind of lean in. And the thing is that the serial killer was singing this song just before he was executed. Time is on my side. Yes, it is. And then it sets into motion one of the creepiest and kind of well-filmed scenes, I think, in movie history, where this cop leans into Denzel Washington and he starts singing the song, and there's this, like, Denzel doesn't really know what's happening at the moment, and then this cop touches another cop and instantly kind of jumps back to normality, and he doesn't even realize what was going on. And then the other cop continues singing the song as he walks out, and Denzel kind of standing up and he's following them, and he's like, what's going on here? And he starts to realize something's going on, but he doesn't fully realize it, and it ends up with him being out on the streets following this guy. And as this person touches person to person, this song, Time is on My Side, just keeps on being picked up by new characters and new actors. And so the song, or the refrain of the song, keeps going, and it's this creepy kind of reminder that time is on my side, that, yeah, this guy's been killed, but somehow his spirit has remained. And so the whole focus of that movie is how do they stop this serial killer that's able to kind of be passed on by touch. Amazing movie. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out. Then, if we're looking at quotes about time, Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien said this: all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And meanwhile, the War and Peace guy, Leo Tolstoy, put it like this: the two most powerful warriors are patience and time. And I think it's important to note up front, when we are talking about or thinking about time, this is a privileged conversation, especially in South Africa. People that talk about having time, making time, some of the things I'm going to talk to you about in this episode, this is a conversation about privilege. This privilege doesn't extend to everybody in the country. If you think of a single mother of 3 in the townships who is working 2 jobs just to stay alive, versus someone like me who can dedicate X amount of time to sit in a room having a conversation about time, there is privilege there. This conversation isn't, there will be elements of this conversation that I think relate to everyone, but knowing the general audience that I have, this is a conversation that carries a weight of privilege. And as with any talk on privilege, the solution might not be to lose the privilege, but to seek out opportunities to leverage or make use of the privilege for the betterment of others, especially those without it. So we can think of things like volunteering, giving up your time to do work that you don't get paid for to help people that can't pay for it, or something like that. Or maybe something like mentoring, using your time to pour into another individual and not being paid for that. Maybe you can think of some other ideas of how we can leverage the time that we have to help make time for other people, to help clear time for other people. Maybe it's a thing of babysitting for parents that have young kids and just really don't have time to be by themselves. And there are various ways that we can get creative, but we need to start this conversation realizing that there's a certain element of privilege when we talk about having time and making time and things like that. The second idea, when I start thinking about time and how it affects me, and we go back to that Leo Tolstoy quote, that the two most powerful warriors are patience and time. This idea of patience, something that I've noticed for me is that typically I typically end up arriving to things really close to the time that they begin, like this episode on time that I'm making in a podcast studio. I happen to be 5 minutes late for, because there's great irony enacting itself. There were things that happened kind of outside of my control as I was about to leave, and that's going to be part of what we talk about. If I'd given myself some barrier time, some time that if something went wrong, I would have still made it on time, then I wouldn't have had this problem. But what I've noticed is when I actually intentionally plan to leave early for something, when I give myself time, then I find I'm so much more peaceful in traffic, because generally I tend to be close to the time, and so everything feels important. I don't want to miss that traffic light. I need to make that gap. I need to worry about that person there. And so you're constantly intense. But if I am 20 minutes early to something, then I am able to be chilled. I'm able to watch the sea as I'm driving past the sea. I'm able to stop and give people places that are trying to come into traffic. And I just generally feel like a much better person. And it's interesting that it's my behavior with time, either leaving things till the last moment or creating a buffer zone and being a little bit earlier, that can affect my attitude and my behavior and in some ways my just general well-being. And so patience is a huge thing. And like I say, this is in the brackets, this whole conversation in the brackets of privilege. But if you've got the time and you can create spaces to be patient, then it slows things down. And that might take the form of creating time and space to walk with somebody. It might be going out to walk by yourself in nature. It might be slowing down to read a book or to pick up that hobby that you've been neglecting, or a number of things. But when we add patience, it really has an effect on our whole spirit and soul and well-being. And then maybe, I don't know if it's quite the opposite of that, but an idea to hold alongside that is this idea of wasted time. And so when I look back on my life, there's this one year that stands out. It's standard 7, or to younger people, grade 9. And that year, for me, I was at Westerford High School, and I remember that year 99% as a year when I played a computer game called Pools of Radiance, which was kind of a Dungeons & Dragons team building, RPG, role-playing game. And the only significance really is that by the end of that year, I kind of looked back and I thought, I've wasted this whole year. And it's not to say computer games are bad, and it's not to say putting a lot of time into something is bad, but for that year specifically, the amount of time I put into that game, and then the year ended and I stopped playing the game and I hadn't beaten the game, I hadn't won the game. It just was like I invested all this time into this thing, and then I stepped away from that thing. And I look back on that year thinking of opportunities I'd missed, thinking of friendships that I hadn't poured into, and it was kind of wasted time or things that were cost or cut or hurt at the expense of time that I chose to invest in what I later saw as a silly game, as a waste of time. And so that for you, what is something that is wasting your time right now? And there are time wasters that are good. We'll get to that in a moment. But are there things that are taking up so much time that if you were to look back on them in 3 years' time, you'd look back and go, wow, I really wish I hadn't invested my time in those things. And another place where this plays out dramatically for me, and I really need help, so maybe you can message me and help me on this one. But it's when it comes to bad books or series or movies. And it hasn't really happened to me a lot with books because I tend to get really good recommendations from people. And so most books, almost all the books I ever pick up, I have generally loved or enjoyed or really appreciated. But it happens with series and with movies a lot, the sense that I must finish it. And it's this curiosity. And I know we started this season talking about a positive curiosity. I think there's maybe a negative version of this curiosity of I have to know what happened. And so I'm going to sit through what is painful acting, painful storytelling, bad cinematography, maybe awful things that are maybe violence or sexual stuff or things that I'm not happy with, but I'm going to push through those just so I can see what happens. And this idea of needing to finish things, like I have this saying that I don't say a lot because I don't know that it's true enough for me to pretend that it's true, but it's almost like life is too short to waste time on bad series or bad movies. And I think as I get older, I get a little bit better at doing it. But at the moment, I am in season 1 of a show called Orville, which is like a ripoff of Star Trek, and it's a kind of this comedic space fantasy thing, and it is awful. I'm really not enjoying it. And the other day, I thought there were 2 seasons, and I saw the other day that there's 3 seasons, and it's like, I feel like I need an intervention because every time I watch another episode, it's like, what are you doing? Like, this is something, I don't need to finish it. It's awful. Stop watching it. I need somebody to just give me permission to stop watching Orville. I don't know if you can relate to that. You're busy watching something and it's just like, no, this is terrible, but must push through another 600 pages of this book. Whereas this week I binged Cobra Kai season 5 in 2 days, and like REM, I feel fine. Like it's not in this case the time that is invested into the thing, but it's time invested into something that I'm not enjoying. And that feels like a sign of insanity in a sense. Like if there's something you're not enjoying, there are so many better series, there are so many better movies, there are so many better books. Stop wasting time on things you're not enjoying. So that is a gift for you. It's something I'm still trying to work out and figure out. But this idea of must finish it, no, if the movie's awful, get up, leave. Even if you leave the cinema. I've walked out of a number of movies in cinemas, and people often judge me, but I've never missed a movie or not finished a series or not read a book and thought, wow, I wish I'd done that. But there have been times when I've forced my way through something or pushed through and gone, wow, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't wasted my time. I wish I had stopped that. I think Squid Games is one example of that. Like the storytelling was really clever. The idea, there were a lot of themes going on, but the level of violence in that show for me, I just walked away from it feeling dirty and thinking, I wish I hadn't pushed through. I didn't need to see that. And we'll all have different levels maybe of what that looks like. But sometimes it's just purely, I'm not enjoying this. This is not fun. It's bad. It's awful. And find permission to walk away. There's an amazing book, Free, and a lot of the ideas that the rest of this episode is based on, I was paging through the book to kind of remember some of the stuff, and just these ideas started coming out. It's by Mark and Lisa Scandrett from America. And the tagline is spending your time and money on what matters most. And it's actually, I think it was a 7-week course that you do with a small group of people. And it was incredibly life transforming. And I've actually got a bunch of the books. I brought the books back to South Africa with these high, lofty ideals of running it with friends. And it's just never really happened. So if you have 6 to 8 people who want to go through this, give me a call. But let me just read through the 7 sections. Each week you deal with a different thing, and time is key here. Spending your time and money on what matters most. We often look at spending money on things that matter most, but this is about time as well. So week 1 is name what matters most to you. Then you move on to value and align your time. Then you practice gratitude and trust. Then you believe that you have enough. Then you create a spending plan. Then you maximize your resources. And lastly, you live generously and spend wisely. And I'm not going to go into all 7 of those things, but the tagline, spending your time and money on what matters most, as we focus on time, I want to lean a little bit more into that. And it kind of looks at the question, who are you and what do you want to be about? And I think what happens is that sometimes we get caught in the busyness of life, or the busyness of life at least. We get caught up in tradition, we get caught up in habit and rhythm, and we get stuck in things. And so we don't often get a time just to step back and reflect. And hopefully this is just a part of that for you, to be able to reflect. Who are you and what do you want to be about? And when you look at the way you spend your time, is that a reflection of who you are and what you want to be about? So this whole course starts off with you creating a 5-word purpose statement. And as I'm sharing this stuff, you might want to even pause this and do this stuff, or do it over the next couple of days, because this is such valuable stuff. Go online, find the book free, and actually work through this with a bunch of your friends, because this literally will change your life. It really helps you to consolidate and to reflect and to make better decisions and to really put your life in order. But as I said, it starts with a 5-word purpose statement. So examples of that might be, for Mark, it was the word artist. And then his purpose statement is, I want to explore and express the wonder, beauty, and terror of life. When he wrote teacher, his purpose statement was, I want to help people experience transformation through active learning. And when he wrote healer, he said, I want to be a friend to those who struggle and work on behalf of those who suffer. So there's no right or wrong answers. You get 5 words that describe your deepest values. What are the things you value most? Who is the person you want to be the most? Come up with 5 words that describe that, and then come up with a little I want to purpose statement that shows how that thing will become a reality. So you can use this purpose statement to help you make clear choices when presented with new opportunities. So a new opportunity comes along, you can go back and look at this purpose statement and go, does this fit with my deeper values and sense of identity? And at times, that is going to help you to say no to things that you probably shouldn't be adding to your life. And a bonus thought for this week that could probably be an entire episode by itself is something that I want to say I learned at college when I was at teachers training college. And I remember the exact day when the lesson happened. But at the same time, I want to say that this is a lesson that I've had to relearn many, many times because I keep forgetting it or I keep moving away from it. And it's this thing called the gift of no. That we need to learn how to say no. And part of that is learning how to say no to good things. And so it's easy to say no to bad things when things are, well, not always easy, but it's sometimes easier to say no to something when it's a temptation or when it's not particularly good. But sometimes you get an opportunity to, for me, it would be to speak at an event or to write a thing or to host an activity. And I could almost use this last week as an example. The past 2 weekends, I was helping out 2 different groups of people with camps. And the first camp, I was involved in the activity, the games, the competition aspect. And so I was on the whole way. I had a team, 2 other people helping me. We did an amazing job. It was with a bunch of scouts and it was fantastic. It was an incredible time. And then the second weekend was with a group called Bottom Up, who work with people, learners from the Cape Flats. And we had a camp called Speak Up, which looks at public speaking, looking at issues in your community. And we looked at education and economics and the city and kind of formulated conversations, and we had panels, and they basically got to work with those. And what I found out on the Friday of the second camp, all this happening while I've been working on this Heartlines campaign, where there's been so many meetings during the week as we've been working towards this launch. And so I've been going full tilt. And then at the end of 3 months of full tilt, I thought this would be a good time to do 2 camps back to back. And so the Friday night of Camp 2, I just found myself thoroughly exhausted, which doesn't normally happen. I'm somebody that often goes to bed at 1, gets up at 5, and is on full energy. And for me to find myself in a space of being exhausted was confusing. It was disappointing because I really wanted to give to the camp. And I was just like, wow, I'm just so tired. And fortunately, by the time my section came on Saturday evening, I had the energy again to be able to present and stuff. But it was realizing that perhaps there were 2 good things that I said yes to. Perhaps I should have actually said no to one of them. And if you say yes to all the opportunities, you'll find that you're going to get overwhelmed, you're going to burn out, you're going to do things less well than you would have done if you were doing less of them. And so learning how to say no is such a valuable lesson. And I want to encourage you to find spaces where that's okay. We often feel bad about or feel like we're letting people down, but they will always find somebody else to do the thing that you can't do. And doing something because you feel like you have to do it is I know we all get into those spaces, but it's not really a great space. And so even sometimes when maybe the thing will fall apart, it won't happen. Like if you know that this is not a good thing for you to do and you've started to work with your time and kind of reflect on it a bit better, then it's part of health, it's part of looking after yourself, and it's part of really being able to show up well at the things that you are meant to be doing and at the things that you want to be doing, is learning to say no. I'm sorry, I can't do that. And a no is always likely to disappoint people, but they will get over it. They will find someone else. It will be fantastic. It may not be as good as if you'd done it, but that's okay. And so find out when you need to say no to good things, and hopefully a little bit easier to say no to things that are bad or are just a waste of time for you. So back to this idea of free. You've figured out what matters most to you. The next step is to value and align your time. And there are two experiments that I really want to invite you to do. And maybe the best way to do is, once I've explained the first one, is actually to just do it right now, because if you put it off, it's unlikely to happen. And experiment number one is to be still. And so pause the podcast and sit still for 5 minutes. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and simply sit. And then kind of think about some of these questions. What do you notice? What do you hear? What do you smell? How does your body feel? In the absence of activity, what are you drawn to think about? What thoughts are kind of rising to the surface? And then can you let go of these thoughts to be still and celebrate that you are alive in this moment? So I'd encourage you to try that. And maybe you could try this every day for a week and kind of lengthen the time. See if by the end of the week you can sit for 20 minutes and just be still. We are used to being on the go. We are used to be going full tilt. We're not used to just stopping and pausing and reflecting and clearing our mind and just being still. And there's nothing weird about it. It's just slowing down and stopping and starting to push the thoughts to the side and just seeing what else is there. And then the second experiment, and I'm sure this will land badly for a lot of you, is to limit the place of media in your life. And this is one that I need to work on. For many of us, the pervasiveness of technology and social media has intensified the challenge to be at rest in our activities. And so be intentional about switching things off or onto silent or leaving your phone charging in another room. That is one that I've found works for me. It's easier to just put the phone in the other room, let it charge, and then have the evening away from my phone. And then kind of coming up with limits. So for me, no email after work hours. And I work flexi time, so that's a hard one to figure out. But usually 5, 6 o'clock, I'm not going to look at my email. Anything that comes into email after that can wait till the next morning. So create limits that work for you in your context, in your space. So the Be Still experiment and the limit the place of media in your life. Those are both good things to try out. And then the next thing this book goes on to is talking about creating a time budget, which is going to be a weird and strange thing for most of us. But I can promise you that this really has the potential to shake things up for you, to really help you find perspective. And so sit with a calendar and estimate your current use of time. Literally put down hours and seconds, like watching series, 3 hours, going for a run, 40 minutes, whatever it is, eating food, everything. Just put everything down that is your current use of time. And then you go back and you look at your purpose statement and your goals and you align your time with that. If I've said that I really want to be present with my family and I look at my week time spent with family, 2 hours, then one of those things is not true. Either it's not a value of mine, or I need to move my time around. I need to make better use of my time so that I can make it a value. And remember that we're looking at this through the perspective of this being a privileged conversation, that for some of us, we can move these things around. We've got flexibility. We've got ways of doing this, while there are many people that are just stretched thin that can't even ask this question. And then once you've aligned your time with your purpose statement and goals, the idea is to build in margin and boundaries. So Christians would use something like the Sabbath, where once a week you don't do any work. And there's a sense of getting rest and building up energy in that day. We've got the weekend, all of us. Some places do a 4 or 3 day weekend. And the idea is that you use that time to build up strength and energy so that you can be productive during the week. So what does it mean to build in margins and boundaries? What might it look for you to leave more space in your life? So the one thing I spoke about is if you have the capacity to be early to appointments, and maybe the trick is putting the appointment 15 minutes or 30 minutes earlier in your calendar so that the time is mapped out. And then realizing, knowing what the starting point is. If you get somewhere early, just taking a book with you and reading it in the car or something like that, or going for a walk around the neighborhood where the meeting is going to happen, or just being able to slow down. Maybe that's a time when you can catch up on phone messages or whatever, or find better uses, have a piece of paper, write poems, whatever it is. But I think if you start doing that, then you'll find that your commute to the place becomes a lot more pleasurable. You're not racing, you're not cutting people off, you're not trying to get to that traffic light. That will go a lot more smoothly. You'll likely be a lot calmer. When you arrive at the place, for whatever meeting it is, you're likely to be in a much better frame of mind. And that time, that interaction, that engagement, whatever it is likely to be a lot more productive, a lot more fun, a lot more interesting. And so think about those things. And then you're going to want to identify your time bandits. And I'm sure just saying that, things come to mind. What are the things that steal your time? At the same time, knowing that sometimes you just need to veg, and that's okay. Again, talking from a privilege lens. But if the vegging or the procrastination takes over, then you could be missing out. If you find when you look at your week, you look at the time budget, that so much time is spent, whether it's sleeping or just lying on the couch or series or whatever, you might be missing out on time with friends, on volunteering somewhere, on a new hobby, or mastering an old hobby. My friend Ashley, who was on this bottom-up camp with me, he has recently started playing the piano again. And Ashley's in his 30s, and he's picked up an old hobby and made time in his life where he can start to master that. Experiment in the kitchen. There might be so many things awaiting you if you are able to identify the things that steal your time and maybe just be a bit more creative in what you plan and when you plan for those things. And then here's another bonus, and this falls alongside all these other things. This is a huge one for me. Turn your phone off when meeting with people or during family times. And I really believe that unless someone is dying or having a baby, it can wait. And even in those cases, it can probably wait as well. But if you can turn your phone off for a business meeting, you can turn it off for me. Because what that does is it tells me that I matter. And so I rarely say anything about this, and I usually tell people it's fine, it's okay, whatever. But it usually internally is not really fine or okay. If I'm having coffee with you and your phone goes off and you choose to answer it, what you are saying to me in that moment is that whoever is on the line, whoever's on the other side, could be a wrong number, they are more important than me in that moment. There are exceptions. Maybe you've got an important work call coming. When you sit down with me, just say, hey, I've got an important work call coming. Is it okay if I leave my phone on? Absolutely hundreds, don't care. But if you're saying, I will spend time with you, I'm going to turn my phone off when I go to the movies, but I'm going to keep it on when I hang out with you, it's pretty much saying that anybody in the world is more important to me than you, and any interruption is acceptable. And so that's just a freebie on the side. As we look at, we've created a time budget. As we look at it, you've created a time budget. The next thing to do is to balance your budget, to consider trade-offs that might help you spend more time on what you believe matters most. Maybe there's some things you have to cut out or cut down or shorten so that you can add in certain other things. Because there are costs to the choices we make, and these often include trade-offs between time, money, and meaning. And so you might be in a job that's making you lots of money, but it is limiting the time that you spend with family. And so your choice might be to make less money, but to have time to spend with your family. Those are the kind of big choices that making a time budget and reflecting on this stuff can really help us to figure out. You might decide that having two cars, this is something we decided a while back, having two cars is bad for the environment, so we're going to skip to one car. But what that means is that there are going to be times when it's going to add time to certain things, or it's going to add inconvenience or whatever. One choice often brings out a positive in one area, but maybe a negative in another. And we need to balance those and see, yeah, we still think it's worth it because we value the planet, and this is a way that we can cut down our footprint. We are going to value that. We're going to lose out some time, some comfortableness, and we're going to make that happen. Now, it's often suggested that many of our common problems, including depression and obesity, are related to the levels of stress that we feel and the demands and expectations of our time. And in some cases, the most effective solution might be to adopt a simpler lifestyle and a slower pace of life. So think about this. Doing this well, figuring out time well, could increase the benefits of your life. It could decrease things like depression, obesity, stresses, other factors like that, and it could really just make life better. And so it's about making space to look at time, to look at how you use time, and to play around with it until you get it working a little bit better for you. And then the final stage that this book talks about is to enact your time budget, to calendar your time, to establish predictable rhythms where possible. One thing that I've found really helpful is to view the week that's on the way. So usually Sunday night, let me look at the week that's about to come. Let me get it into my head. I've got those meetings there. I need to fit in time to, if I'm speaking on Thursday, then I need to make space Monday or Tuesday to prepare that. I need to make sure I've got enough travel time for this kind of thing. So view the week that is on the way. And then every day, set daily priorities. Look at what you're hoping to achieve in that day. Figure those things out and then enact them. And then make decisions about new opportunities. Once you've got your time budget kind of visible to you, when a new opportunity comes in, it might mean that something already has to move out or be shifted around. Or it might mean that you say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't add that to my list of things. I found this amazing Chinese proverb that says, an inch of time is an inch of gold, but you can't buy that inch of time with an inch of gold. And then if you really want a gut punch, there's a guy called Lao Tzu who said, time is a created thing. To say I don't have time is to say I don't want to. And I think this is key, that we need to change up the way we speak about time. People often say I don't have time, and it's generally not true. I choose not to spend my time in that way is a true statement. And I often give people a hard time on this. If they say to me, I don't have time, then I usually push it back to them and go, oh, you're not choosing to spend your time that way. And it can feel like a bit of a dig or a bit of a like nasty thing to do. But I think it really helps people to think about what they are saying. And so I'm mentoring this young guy at the moment, and he often says, like, I don't have time. And I'd love for him, this is a conversation I must have with him, to think about the words, I choose not to spend my time in that way, which is fine most of the time. But be aware that that is the choice you're making. You do have time, but generally you are choosing to spend it a different way. And so maybe the opposite of good time use is regret. I wish I had, or maybe I wish I hadn't. And neither of those are of any use to anyone. Rather, choose to be intentional going forward so that you don't get to a point 3 months down the line or a year down the line or 5 years down the line where you're looking back at the way you spent your time and you're going, oh, I really regret that. I really wish I hadn't spent that. And maybe that's a good way of looking at the stuff that you're doing now, the things that you're involved in and engaged in. And we can't always tell what that looks like from the future. But there's certain things that we know that 3 years from now, if we look back at the way we're spending time now, we will go, that is not a good idea. But alongside this, and all of these conversations that we have on Out of the Fishbowl, they are nuanced, they are complicated, they are not one size fits all. And so it's important that we look to balance. And the words of Marth Trolley Curtin, who said, time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time. And there's some truth in that. I think there's a lot of permission in there for me to just procrastinate heavily. But I want to lean into that thing. Time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time. And so sometimes true friendship, there was a quote in the friendship episode we did that said, like, sometimes the best friendship is go to your friend's house and you both nap together, like wasted time, but time spent together and this sense of connection. Sometimes it's just hanging around with a good mate, wasting time, whatever that means. And time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time. And the final quote that I want to share with you is a guy called Robert Auden who says, time flies, it's up to you to be the navigator. Or, as I like to say, time is on my side. Yes, it is. Let's spend our time wisely. Let's be intentional about the way we use time, the way we speak about time, and let's appreciate the gift of time. And if we use it well, then we start to live well.
I mean, that's all what I'm thinking. Anyway, maybe you can use it well, but it is not well used, because it haven't been used. It have just been given to you, and you decide, I don't want to use it that way. It's not just there. You can't use time. It's not like, look, I've got time, I'm going to use it. I can't make it into a hammer or hit something with it. You just have it, but you don't have it. I like the weird thing about time. How can you have it, but you don't have it? I can't show you the time that I have. I had a good time. Oh, where are it? Can you show me a photo? No, I can show you a photo of what I did. I can't show you a photo of the time. I like the wind. It is invisible. But it can't blow things. Time cannot blow things. Did you ever hear of time blowing something over? That is not a possibility, because time is on my side. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it are not, is all what I'm saying.